Actually, yes, still morning. Good morning, everyone. We're here today to talk about specific steps that have been taken regarding the School Resource Officer Program. I'm going to welcome everyone here, but I'm going to defer to, in the first instance, to Dr. Jackson, who's going to go through the particulars. With us today are Fernando Mojica, who's a principal at Roberto Clemente Academy, and Dr. Femi Skanes, who is a principal at Morgan Park High School. And also I want to acknowledge Jadine Chow, who is the CPS Safety and Security Officer. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo Mayor Lightfoot's sentiments in welcoming everybody here today. This is a very important conversation. As we've stated from the beginning, no one understands a school community better than its educators, families, and students. I also want to specifically thank the local school councils throughout the city. They've done a really incredible job listening to the passionate arguments all around this issue and made decisions that they believe best suit their local school communities. They engage their school communities through a transparent process. They listened with open minds to students, parents, and partners, because in CPS we know that every adult connected to this district wants a safe and supportive learning environment for all of our students. The educators and leaders of this district have been working to break the school to prison pipeline over the past decade, and we have instituted many progressive reforms that have moved us away from a zero tolerance policy. We eliminated several punitive policies in our disciplinary system that we know were disproportionately impacting Black and brown students. We chose as a school system to focus on social and emotional learning and supports, and we see the results of that. We chose to invest in our Black and brown students through academic programming across the city, and it's paying off. Today, the district released new data highlighting an 80% reduction in arrests for students on school property since 2012. This includes an 86% reduction for Latinx students and a 78% reduction amongst Black students. Rates of arrest among Black students remain unacceptably high, and we must remain focused on addressing this as a school district, and we will do that. We are making real sustained progress over time. We have a laser focus on becoming an equitable school district, and we will continue to do that by listening closely to the communities that we serve. To build on the progress that I just announced, we have decided to institute a series of reforms that I want to talk about today. While we continue to believe that our school communities are best suited to determine the role of the SROs, we recognize that improvements needed to be made to the program. So as part of our proposed intergovernment agreement with CPD, SROs will also be required to comply with the Welcoming City and Welcoming School ordinances that protect our students from discrimination and allow our undocumented students to feel safe and protected in our classrooms and hallways. Furthermore, CPS and CPD agreed to prohibit SROs from entering any information into CPD Criminal Enterprise Information System, and we removed all of those CPD terminals from our schools to ensure that SROs cannot access those databases on our campuses. CPS will explicitly direct all complaints against SROs to COPA so that they can be tracked, reviewed, and resolved in a timely manner. Also, this initiative is led by our Chief Officer for Safety and Security, Jadine Chow, who's here with us today. She's going to meet every 2 weeks with officials from CPD to ensure that these reforms are being implemented. Because establishing these policies is only the first step, we must ensure that they are implemented with fidelity. Finally, at the very end of the day, we believe that creating a safe and positive learning environment starts with the community. That's why these reforms also include a series of partnerships to foster a more collaborative approach to creating that safe and supportive learning environment for our students. We began by partnering with the Center for Childhood Resilience at Lurie's Children's Hospital to train every SRO alongside the school-based behavioral health teams on restorative practices and trauma-informed practices. We are also going to work with MICFA, with the MICFA Challenge Group, the Youth Safety Advisory Council, to develop training in a measurement system that is designed to ensure that student voice is at the center of our decisions related to the SRO program's effectiveness. Finally, we are enlisting the support of the University of Chicago Crime and Education Labs to help analyze the school-based arrest data and inform strategies to help us further reduce the disparities and disrupt and break this school-to-prison pipeline. I want to thank all of our partners that I just mentioned and CPD for working collaboratively with CPS to initiate these reforms under Mayor Lightfoot and her leader, Mayor Lightfoot. I also want to commend the mayor on her leadership on this very important topic. Every student deserves to come into a safe and welcoming environment where they feel valued and free. We have heard from our students loud and clear. The activism that has been demonstrated amongst our students gives me hope for the future of this city and this country. The reforms that are being announced today are a direct result of their tenacious spirit. I want to thank everyone who participated at the local level and at the district level to help inform the policies that we're presenting today. Now, I would like you to hear directly from school leaders across the city who had to grapple with this issue. We start by hearing from Principal Mojica, who is the principal of Roberto Clemente High School in the Humboldt Park community. I'm coming next. You coming next? Oh, sorry. I'm actually introducing the mayor. She gets the call to audibles.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Thank you, Jadine Chow, and thank you for our principals who are here from Roberto Clemente Community Academy, as well as from Morgan Park High School. A little over 2 weeks ago, Dr. Jackson and I came together to announce that CPS schools will be going remote for the first quarter this fall, with the hope that transitioning to a hybrid model in the second quarter should the public health data allow for that. This decision was rooted in what we were seeing in the science of COVID-19 and also as a result of listening to incredible stakeholders within our school community. It was rooted in what we were hearing from our families and school staff. We know that the best policy decisions come from deep engagement with every facet of the entire school community, and we are constantly using that feedback to create policies that ensure their safety and well-being. Today, we are proud to double down on this very commitment by announcing the reforms that Dr. Jackson outlined regarding the School Resource Officer Program. Throughout this process, Dr. Jackson and I have made it a priority to underscore the importance of placing the decision of whether to have SROs in CPS schools in the hands of individual local school councils. The local school councils, made up of parents and other stakeholders, are in the best position to understand what their individual schools need and what their communities they represent are needing. Earlier this summer, the LSCs began to vote on whether they will continue to have SROs in their schools or pursue alternative safety plans for the upcoming school year. And now, as of today, 17 schools have decided that they do not need an SRO program to create a safe school environment, reducing the budget for the SRO program to approximately $12 million for the upcoming school year, less than half of what it was last year. LSCs, let me remind you, are elected democratic bodies that share our commitment to listening to the communities that they serve and acting in those communities' best interest. I personally value their voices and input as they are the closest to these issues on an individual school basis. And I applaud them for taking up this responsibility and exercising their right to vote to generate the change that they want to see. That is empowerment in action. In the wake of George Floyd's murder and the passionate protests that we've seen both in our city and around the world, I understand the concerns and questions that many have surrounding the issue of policing, and particularly when it involves our youth. This is not a new question for the city of Chicago. We value these conversations and invite these debates as we work together with our school stakeholders to continue creating a safe and nurturing environment for our young people, one where students feel safe physically and emotionally. And that's exactly why these reforms have been enacted. It's also imperative that we maintain safety and security in our schools, as well as have concrete plans in place once students and staff return to the classroom. 55 LSCs have decided that they want to keep the SRO program. And we respect the democratic decision-making process of each LSC and will continue to support them, all of them, regardless of which path they chose in keeping school communities safe. That's our obligation, and we will meet that. In addition to giving LSCs the ability to choose whether or not SROs will be at their schools, these reforms also have significant and necessary changes to the SRO hiring and training process. Dr. Jackson went over them, but let me emphasize a few. These improvements grew out of the same conversation that have been ongoing for over a year, really from the start of this administration, with CPS leadership, the LSCs, young people, educators, and other stakeholders who have been pushing for change. Now, principals will have the ability to directly participate in SRO interviews and reject or request candidates for consideration. And candidates will undergo an extensive screening process, ensuring that their backgrounds are free of excessive force allegations and placing a premium on experiences working with young people in a learning environment. Prior to their assignment to a school, the selected officers will have, in addition to their standard training, annual CPS and youth development training that will cover topics such as de-escalation, recognizing implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and crisis intervention. We understand that different communities have different needs that influence the relationship between SROs and the schools that they serve. And that's why it's important that the LSCs, who have the pulse of their communities, have the definitive say in whether or not SROs are at their schools. We need to respect the LSCs, we need to respect their process and the results. These reforms are not an end in and of themselves. Instead, they will serve as the next step in our mission to continue protecting our residents, particularly our young people, listening to their needs and responding to the needs that have been articulated, putting us much closer to obtaining an optimal and safe school environment. Thank you again to the teams at CPS, CPD, the Board of Education, and City Council who have worked with us on these reforms, as well as all LSCs across the city who took the time to deliberate and decide amidst a maelstrom of intense social pressure. And I also want to thank our young people who stood up and spoke out about their concerns, their fears, and yes, their demands all across the city. That feedback from our young people has been and will continue to be invaluable. And I want you to know we have heard you, and we have taken major steps to respond. And the announcement today reflects what we have heard. Your willingness to think critically, organize your peers and communities, and speak out is a good, positive thing for our city. We want to make sure that our young people learn, develop, and achieve their God-given potential in a safe and nurturing environment. And we want to create the kind of schools where that growth and development is protected and supported. So while it remains without question that the school year will look entirely different than what it has in the past, our commitment to giving our children an engaging, nurturing, and above all else, safe learning environment has never wavered and never will. Thanks, everyone. And now I will invite Principal Mojica to say a few words. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Good morning. My name is Fernando Mojica, and I'm the principal of Roberto Clemente Community Academy in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago. One of the most important parts of my job is creating a school culture where every student is able to focus on what matters most, learning and growing academically. Students are unable to thrive in an environment that makes them feel unsafe or uncomfortable. The future of student safety at Clemente is something that we have been discussing for a long time. When the conversations around school resource officers began to grow several months ago, we made additional efforts to engage our students, teachers, parents, and community members to make sure that our final decision was reflective of what our community wanted. Ultimately, the LSC voted to remove SROs for the upcoming school year. The vote was not because our 2 SROs were viewed as a problem In fact, our school's relationship with CPD is quite strong. Rather, we simply decided that our vision for the future of Clemente did not include the police in our school as part of our approach to student safety. So what is our approach? We plan to continue working with our community to develop restorative and culturally responsive practices to undo years of inequitable policies and help our students and community heal from historical and generational trauma. Nearly all of our students are young people of color, and most come from families that face constant financial hardship. It is my belief that these restorative practices will have transformative effects on their academic and social-emotional development. One way that I know we will continue to prioritize student safety is by continuing to partner with the Puerto Rican Cultural Center through the District Safe Passage Program to give our own community members the agency to keep students safe walking to and from school. I plan to grow Clemente's strong relationship with Chief Jadine Chow and the district's Office of Safety and Security as we work together to engage our students and families on a plan that reflects our community's needs and above all else, keeps students safe. This will be an ongoing process that will evolve as the needs of our community change. Student voice will continue to be a crucial piece of our decision-making moving forward, because I want every student to be able to think back on their Clemente experience and say, here's a way that I was able to make a difference in my community by helping to create a safe and inviting place to explore the world. I'm very thankful that CPS empowered our school to make this important decision on our own. Thank you. And now it's my honor to invite Dr. Femi Skanes to the
Good morning. Thank you to Mayor Lightfoot, to Dr. Jackson, to my colleague, Principal Mojica. I'm Dr. Femi Skanes, principal of Morgan Park High School on Chicago's far south side. As a mother of 3 teenagers, one who attends Morgan Park High School, an educator, and a civic-minded citizen, I certainly understand and respect the views of all parties on the topic of school resource officers. I know that there are many ways to approach school safety, but something that I think all school leaders can agree on is that safety is extremely important for students, teachers, and families. Because this is such an important issue, I'm sincerely thankful for the opportunity to work with my school community to make a decision that is best for Morgan Park High School. To ensure that we heard from our students, parents, teachers, and the community directly, I collected data that we used alongside the data from CPS and the district's LSC toolkit to help our LSC make a decision. After seeing that our school community overwhelmingly responded with a desire to retain our SROs, our LSC voted unanimously to keep them. One of the reasons that I believe that our school community felt so strongly about keeping SROs is because they have played a major part in our student support plan. Several years ago, there were concerns about student safety during dismissal. Our team collaborated with our SROs to immediately resolve the issue by creating a responsive safety dismissal plan. Even though we have voted to retain our SROs for now, I don't see the vote as the end of our community engagement efforts, but rather it's the start of a continued dialogue about how we can support our students to the fullest extent possible. That's why I have made a commitment to our school community to add an SRO update as a standing agenda item during the principal report at all LSC meetings. I have also committed to working with CPS and CPD to retain officers who align with the mission and vision of Chicago Public Schools and Morgan Park High School. This specifically includes working with SROs who demonstrate respect and empathy for our students. I know that the district's continued efforts to improve the SRO program will only make an individual student's plan that much stronger. We look forward to continuing to work with the Office of Safety and Security to identify additional ways to prioritize student safety. Again, we are grateful for the opportunity to make a decision that represented the voices of our school community. We are committed to maintaining a school environment that is emotionally and physically safe for students and staff, because that's what will help us transform our students into lifelong learners and leaders. Thank you.
And now we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Mayor, I have a question. Is it possible for Mr. Mojica to give a statement in Spanish? I know Univision was requesting that. Before we forget, we get into the questions. Would you be able to say something in Spanish?
I don't want to put him on the spot, so.
I have to do my best to butcher my mother tongue if you like.
Yeah.
Please, sir.
Thank you.
And we'll try to do a little bit of a translations from what I wrote, if you don't mind. Buenos días y gracias. Me llamo Fernando Mojica, el director de la escuela Roberto Clemente en la comunidad de Humboldt Park de Chicago. La decisión que nosotros hicimos para remover los SROs de la escuela no era una decisión que hicimos solo la administración, pero tuvimos muchas personas buscando información sobre esto. This is a little tough. I do apologize in my Spanglish. We reached out to los pedimos información sobre esto para de los padres, de los estudiantes, también de los que trabajan en la escuela sobre esta situación y cómo se sienten. Y la mayoría de la gente quería sacar la policía de la escuela. No que tenemos problemas con la policía, pero no queremos policía adentro de la escuela. Estamos trabajando con el Puerto Rican Cultural Center y con el Safe Passage Program del Puerto Rican Cultural Center para seguir estando seguros que todos los estudiantes están seguros o están they're safe de la casa hasta la escuela, de la escuela hasta la casa. Y también vamos a trabajar con CPS, con la Oficina de Safety y Security, para estar seguros que cuando las situaciones cambian, que nosotros podemos cambiar con la situación. The situation as they evolve, we'll be able to evolve with the situation. Y también vamos a seguir trabajando con los estudiantes para estar seguros que estamos oyendo las necesidades de ellos, de las bocas de ellos. That's what that's about. Close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.
Mayor Lightfoot, Dr. Jackson, we're less than 3 weeks away from the first day of school. Are you confident that you have enough time to do this special training? You talked about Lurie Children's Hospital, the additional training on de-escalation, psychological training. It seems like it's a lot to digest with not that much time left. But do you feel confident that you can get this plan in place for the first day of school?
Oh, yes. First of all, the work has been ongoing. It's not just starting today. I'm going to invite Jadine Chow, who's really been running point on this, to go forward. We always make sure that we're prepared, that we have the timeline in mind, and we make sure that we get everything done. But also the work is going to be, this isn't static training. It's also going to be taking place in refreshers through the course of the school year. And as you know, we're starting completely virtually, so that also gives us more time. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jadine Chow. I'm the Chief of Safety and Security for Chicago Public Schools. To that question, we have been working ongoing throughout the summer to make sure that we have the training in place had we gone to a hybrid model. So as a matter of fact, we have training sessions scheduled in the coming weeks for the SROs, even though we are not going to be in the building because we are going to in-home or at-home learning. Having said that, your question about the Lurie participation and the MICVA Challenge participation, those partnerships will be on an ongoing basis, and so our intention is to continue to engage stakeholders to make sure that we are co-building that training. We have time now to do that, and so over the coming weeks, we're putting together the final descriptions of what that training will look like, and then we'll have time to deliver that before we return to school, hopefully at the end of first quarter.
May I ask a follow-up? Police officers were already being screened, correct? So how is this different Does this involve a more thorough check, looking at excessive force violations, et cetera?
Yes, thank you for that question. So a lot of the feedback that we received during this process was we really have to strengthen our selection criteria. So yes, there was a section in the previous IGA that spoke to acceptable disciplinary history. This year, we're moving to excellent disciplinary history. Based on the feedback we've received, we've tightened those parameters and to make sure that we have people in the building who are supportive of our children based on their records. In addition, the other important enhancement that has been made is the chief of operations will do a attestation of signing off and ensuring that all the SROs that have met our criteria have all that will be in our building have met our criteria. One additional enhancement that's in there that was not previous is that Chief of Operations will interview all of the SROs that will be in our building to ensure that there's not just a disciplinary fit, but also to make sure that there's a fit based on philosophy, based on their alignment with the mission that CPS has to support our children.
Can you clarify, do SROs, will they still have access to the CPD gang database? And I think the mayor might have answered this already, adding students to the database.
So it's explicit in the IGA that they are prohibited from adding any student information into the database. It's now called the Criminal Enterprise Information System. In addition, we're taking it a step further, is we're removing all of the terminals they're not in all the schools, but where there were terminals, all of those terminals will be removed so that the SROs will not have access to those systems.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just to clarify, what we had before was essentially a decentralized system where district commanders made the decisions about who would participate in the SRO program. I think one of the strengths of the reforms that have been put into place, and this is something that I credit CEO Jackson for really pushing, is that the Chief of Operations, so that's like the number 3 person within CPD, is now owning responsibility for the CPD side of this. It's not going to be at the district commander level. It's many levels up. I think that adds a level of credibility and ownership for making sure that the partnership between CPS and CPD is held at the appropriate level within CPD. So that's a fairly significant and I think important improvement.
Mayor, we have a question from the Chicago Tribune related to this about 4 aldermen filing to force a meeting on Friday. How do you feel about that? Would you participate in that meeting?
Well, first of all, we have to see what happens. I learned of this just before we started this, but here's what I would say is this. This is a very difficult time and challenging time for all of us across the city, in and outside of city government. What we really need to be focusing on is ways in which we can reach common ground and listen to each other. And I think this announcement today is really a testament to listening. Unfortunately, I think the 2 main proponents of this meeting unfortunately have a history of grandstanding. They don't listen, they don't ask questions, and they're not really committed to answers. So we'll see what happens, but I think this is a time where we need to make sure that we are working together to find common ground to address issues. This is not a time for grandstanding, just for purposes of trying to seek media attention, which unfortunately, at least 2 of those aldermen that signed their name to it, that seems to be their MO. It's very unfortunate. They are who they are, but we need to make sure that we're working on doing things that are productive and using resources in terms of, and also time, in a way that is actually productive. So we'll see what happens.
And Mayor, may I follow up on that? The NBC5's Lauren Stauffer is asking, in regards to this letter filed by the 4 aldermen, that they are asking for a National Guard presence for 4 months. Do you know enough? Are you prepared to comment on that?
There again, The governor and I have daily conversations about a range of different things that are going on in Chicago, and of course we're talking on a regular basis about safety. It's unfortunate again that these aldermen haven't asked questions, and I think many of them fail to participate in the various briefings that we've offered. This isn't the way you get things done, and certainly not something like that. It's quite foolish. And it's unfortunate that they are grandstanding again on an issue that's so important, which is the safety and security of our communities. There's a better way to get things done.
Mayor, we have a question from the Chicago Tribune, Hannah Leone, and she is asking about if there is a misconduct allegation against an SRO in the future, what will be the process for handling that among CPS and CPD? Does CPS have a system for tracking new allegations or sustained complaints against officers?
Again, I'll defer to J.D. to get into the particulars, but obviously we anticipated that nothing is static, everything is fluid, and there's a process by which that information will come from CPD to CPS and appropriate action will be taken. J.D., you want to address that?
So another one of the enhancements that we've added to this year's IGA is that we are directing new complaints through a centralized process through COPA, which is the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. In the past, the complaints might have gone to a local district, through a commander, through a school sergeant, and now we are going to promote this new centralized process. That will allow us to track these new complaints. It'll also allow us to ensure, as the mayor stated earlier, that they will be investigated and handled in a swift manner. One of the other things that we've added, as was discussed a minute ago, is that I will be attending bi-weekly meetings with Chicago Police Department. So as these complaints come through, that will be a standing agenda item in those meetings to understand if any allegations have come through on the police officers, so we can determine what the appropriate action is on that situation.
May I ask a question about the local school councils? The Chicago Tribune asking, what is CPS doing to enforce local school council transparency, such as regularly posting agendas and minutes?
All right. All of our local school councils are trained on the Open Meetings Act and the proper protocol. One of the enhancements that we included during this process is we made public all of the votes on CPS's website so that the public can inspect that, and also made sure that they were aware of the meeting times and dates for those votes should people want to participate. All of our local school councils routinely document their meetings with minutes. This is typically kept at the local school level. Some schools post it on their websites. Given the scrutiny around this process, we are making sure that all of our LSCs look at those minutes. They have to approve them at the next meeting before they become official, and those will be publicly available for inspection.
If a school decides, or there's a groundswell to change the policy, I mean, I know that it was voted on, when would be the first opportunity in the future if they want to bring back the SRO?
They could do it at their next LSC meeting. They can call a special meeting. We're flexible and open. I think that what we have said from the beginning of this process is that this is a community-driven process. The LSCs that have engaged in this process listen to the voices of many people. There are a lot of different views on this topic, but they ultimately made the decision that they think is best for their students. If that changes, they can do it at their upcoming meeting, or they can call a special meeting to do so.
May I ask some off-topic questions? Mayor, I don't know if you've had a chance to respond to the Chicago Teachers Union, the grievance, and they're alleging that they are not getting enough information.
I mean, I will let Dr. Jackson respond to that, but let me just say this. The Chicago's Teachers Union, CPS does a tremendous job of making sure that the Chicago Teachers Union is engaged and at the table. And I won't say more than that, but since there is a grievance pending, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you. Just to echo Mayor Lightfoot's remarks, we meet with them on a weekly basis. There's regular contact and exchange of ideas and proposals. I think at the end of the day, if I'm being transparent, this is really about a few things that we're just unwilling to give up on. We are unwilling to reduce the amount of instructional time for our students. They have lost so much already. We're unwilling to take accountability out of our system when our students and families deserve that. They deserve the same quality of instruction that people receive across the country. So we believe that we've put together a plan, again, where we listen to the community. Our parents told us point blank that they were much more comfortable with in-person instruction. They also said that they wanted to ensure that their students were learning, and we just refuse to back down on anything that takes us further away from our goal, which is providing every student with a high-quality education. But we have been meeting with them constantly, and we will continue to do so.
Dr. Jackson, a question from Fran Spielman, Sun-Times. She's asking the question about CPD spent $47.1 million on overtime in June. I guess this question might be more for the mayor. Despite Mayor Lightfoot, your edict to get overtime under control, Fran says you canceled days off and returned them to 12-hour days after the second round of looting. How much has that added to the $700 million shortfall, and when will those extended hours end?
Well, I think we've answered this question specifically from Fran Spielman before. The one thing that we absolutely must do is respond to the conditions on the ground. And let's recall what we were experiencing almost on a daily basis in June. Virtually every day, multiple places across the city, we were seeing protests of various sizes on various issues. The one thing that we absolutely must do is make sure that First Amendment rights of speech and assembly are protected. And what that means is making sure that literally people who are in the streets are physically safe. And that required CPD to expend some additional resources. We make no apologies for that because that was necessary given the circumstances on the ground. I don't have precise figures for you here, but this is something that was done, obviously in consultation with the mayor's office, but in recognition that the times that we are in require us to be nimble and flexible and making sure that we're adapting to the circumstances on the ground, and that's what CPD has done throughout the summer. This is a very different and unique circumstances, and I think everybody recognizes that.
Mayor Lightfoot, Fran has a follow-up budget question regarding the Water Management Commissioner. She's saying that your budget director and the Water Management Commissioner told aldermen this week that you're weeks away from outlining an $8 billion to $10 billion plan to replace lead service pipes. And during the campaign, you called that a moral imperative. How do you plan to finance that at a time when the city is facing a $700 million shortfall and a $1 billion shortfall next year? Will homeowners be asked to share the cost?
Well, obviously, we are facing a difficult set of circumstances regarding the lead service lines. For years, up until fairly recently, the city of Chicago required lead service lines to be installed from the water main into the house. There was an opportunity even 10 years ago to address this issue when the city embarked upon a very ambitious water main replacement process, but for whatever reason, the prior administration did not address that. The time of reckoning is now. And as you heard from the Water Commissioner and from the Budget Director, we are hard at work on trying to address this issue and not kick the can down the road. Now, to be clear, no, we do not have an extra $10 billion laying around. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing this in a smart way, we're doing it in an efficient way, and obviously the replacement of the lead service lines, given the proliferation of them across our city, is a multi-year process. What we acknowledged the other day was simply that this is an issue that is top of mind for us, that we're working on specific plans about how to do it effectively, and obviously the financing for that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we figured out the financing piece, because I said, even if we weren't facing fiscal challenges, and I'm not going to verify the assumptions that are baked into the reporter's questions because I don't know that they're accurate, But even if we weren't facing the kind of challenges we are, $10 billion, which is the estimate, the outside estimate, is a lot of money under any circumstances. So we've got to think creatively about that, and obviously we will be seeking help both from the federal government, from the state, as best as we can to address this issue.
We probably have time for 2 more.
Okay. Dana Kozlov, CBS 2, is asking, in light of the recent COVID outbreak that forced the shutdown of the Fire Academy this week, many firefighters are concerned that the tests at McCormick Place that are occurring, they're saying hundreds of people will be in one room, and even with masks, they don't feel safe. It's also in violation of the indoor capacity rule. Why are these tests still taking place?
Well, I don't, again, I push back on some of the premise of the question, and I don't think that that's necessarily correct. I know that we're having these battalion chief test at McCormick Place, which is a massive indoor facility, and we've taken every precaution possible. It is not the same when you're sitting for several hours in one test as opposed to the circumstances that happened at the academy. There were a lot of precautions that were put in place at the academy, and the various recruits were admonished over and over again about what they needed to do once they left the academy to make sure that they were continuing to engage in the public health precautions that would keep them safe. Unfortunately, my understanding is that didn't happen, and that was a significant problem. We can put rules and plans in place. We can advise people about what the best practices are. We can provide them with equipment and tools. But all of this, as we've been saying since March, really comes down to the kind of individual decisions that are made by people. And unfortunately, what we saw in the circumstances of the academy, which again is very different than a testing circumstance, is that people didn't pay attention. They didn't listen. They didn't follow the precaution. They were engaged in lots of activities after hours that put them and their colleagues at risk. I hope we don't see a repeat of that, but that is the facts.
One final question, Mayor Lightfoot. Sarah Schulte, ABC 7, and this is a CPS question. CPS tuition-based pre-K parents are upset that they must pay full tuition to have their 3 to 5-year-olds learn remotely. Is it fair to have parents pay thousands of dollars a year?
I'll let Dr. Jackson address that issue.
Yeah, we are working with a handful of tuition-based pre-K programs that we have across the city. But what we have expressed to parents is that it is a tuition-based program. It is funded based on the money that comes from parents' tuition. We are working to maintain all of those programs across the city. We did have a few people who elected not to enroll their students in the program, and we of course respect that. But we know that the situation that we're in right now is a temporary situation, and we want to make sure that when we are in a post-COVID environment, those programs are still in place, which requires us to continue to charge people for the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.